Hey everybody, welcome to the Mountain Deer Podcast. My name's Rodney Elmer. It's a Sunday. Happy Sunday. I'm here with the boys and we have a special guest star today. We're going to be talking about shed hunting, and moose, and even maybe a little bit of whitetail and all the stuff that goes with shed hunting. So welcome to the podcast. What do you think, Ryan? You are normally our official shed dog.
Yeah, normally I'm the shed beagle.
You find probably just about the most of them, and you come right into them. And then this year, Taylor, who's behind the scenes here, Taylor ended up beating you by finding a match pair.
Yeah, we haven't done that yet.
Well,
Right.
I was doing really good for this season, and then Tara comes in with a match set, and he kind of bumped me out of the running. But
And then we introduced, and we're about to introduce the real shed man, the moose man himself.
The moose shed magnet.
The moose shed magnet. And he made us all feel kind of bad.
Yeah, Dad has. You don't know this, ANJO, but he spends most of his time as number one wherever he goes. It's great to see him be second best at something.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. We'd like you all to meet a good friend of ours. His name is ANJO
BONANNO.
BONANNO.
It's all right.
That's right. You get it.
Yeah. Yeah. Same difference.
He's like, how good of friends could we be?
Yeah.
you can't even pronounce my last name right. What the hell's wrong with you?
He's been shed hunting a lot. He's kind of the master at it. And as far as all the people that we know in New England here, he probably holds, some of the most records in the book. And, he's got quite a collection at his place.
Yeah, I do.
How'd you get started? How'd you get started in shed hunting?
I don't know. I was probably like 17 years old, and I just started thinking to myself, well, these deer shed these antlers, and I'm just going to go see if I can find some, And
Oh, yeah. So you started with deer.
So I started with deer,
Yeah.
and I did the deer thing until 2009.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
So I did the deer thing for a long time beforehand, and I found a lot of deer sheds.
Yep.
And my first shed I ever found was a little spike with a brow tine on it.
No kidding.
So that was what it started it all for me. When I found that, I was like, like, oh my God,
Can't be done.
This is cool.
Do
Like,
you still have that?
I
You
still have
that?
I still have the antler. Yeah.
Nice.
That's cool.
Nice.
And I always go back to it. Like every year I always pick it up and put it in my hand. It just fits in your hand.
Yep.
So it was kind of a neat little memorabilia for me for when I picked up shed hunting. And I don't know, I did the whitetail thing for years. And like I said, 2009, I said, well, I want to find a moose antler.
Yep.
So I started going out looking for moose antlers. And it took me a little while to get the hang of it. But I went from finding these little tiny, smaller antlers to these big, moose antlers.
Right.
And when I first picked it up and I started finding them, I was like, well, there's one. And I'm looking across this cut, and it was just like, blah.
Right.
Like, here it is, and it was like, it was like 70, 80 yards away, and I could see it. And I'm like,
Wow.
well, there's one right there. Yeah. So, I picked it up pretty quick because I think I had trained my eye to find that odd-looking shape,
Yeah.
and I just started picking them up.
The principles are kind of the same.
Yeah, for sure.
in what you're looking for and the places to look for them.
Yeah.
What was your key place for finding like whitetail sheds?
So pretty much yards and food.
Oh yeah.
Like mainly the food, and then where they traveled from their bedding area back to their food. Like that's the key spot was where I probably found 85% of my whitetail sheds at the food though.
No kidding.
I'd say 85% of it was at the food. And so, this year me and the dogs have picked up one whitetail shed this year so far. It was it's a 4-point side to an 8-pointer. And I spotted it. And then my youngest dog, she just turned a year old. She actually picked it up and brought it right back to me.
That's cool.
Yep.
So, I know she's on it at, just over a year old.
Yep.
How long have you been using dogs versus just like walking through the woods trying to find them?
So I've only been using my dogs. My oldest, Hutch, he's just turned 3. So he's like 3 years and 3 months, something like that. He's like 3 years old. And
What kind of dog?
they're chocolate labs.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Full-blooded labs, American.
Yep.
And then I picked up the female, Ren.
Yep.
She's a year old, and like I said, I just started playing fetch with her and having Hutch. Like last spring, we went out and we absolutely destroyed antlers in the spring. This last spring, and she was with us for pretty much all of it. And
Oh,
so
yeah.
she picked it right up, you know,
Right.
like bang. She caught right on and knows what she's doing.
Yeah, and she's following around a more experienced dog, and that is a fast track.
The older
Yeah, oh,
dog
yeah.
helping teach her.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that she's, from my experience with my other dog, Hutch, and then with Ren, seeing what Ren's doing at her age, I think that Ren's going to be even better.
As good or better. Yeah.
I think probably a little better. Hutch is awesome at his shed hunting. Like he knows what he's doing.
And he's understood it, right? He understands why you're there.
Yeah, he knows what we're doing. Like
Yeah.
he knows, and I brainwashed him that when he was just a puppy. You know, when I got him, first toy I gave my dog was an antler, a fresh antler. I didn't give him a tennis ball. I didn't give him a squeaky toy. I gave him an antler and let him play with an antler. And then I started like playing fetch with him in the house with it. And then I'd hide him in the house here and there, and then I'd go outside and stash him, or I'd play fetch with him out in the yard with him, and he picked it right up. Like I mean, bang, you know.
Right. In a couple months, he really got it.
He got it down, and then I'd go up to the property sometimes, and I'll throw him in the camper to keep him enclosed in there in the morning, and I'll have my coffee, and I'll go out and I'll take like 5-6 antlers out, and I'll just go throw them in random spots. And then I'll be like, okay, you ready? And he'll come out of there flying, you know? and so now Ren's doing it too. She did it last year with us. And so like, I'm just saying, find the bone, you know, let's go find that bone. And they're coming back with these antlers, and I'm throwing them a treat, and they just love it.
Yeah.
What's
It turns into their money.
Yeah,
Yeah.
What's the difference between what you were able to find in a spring by yourself versus now having dogs? What do you think? Like, what's the numbers?
I couldn't really tell you the numbers, but I can tell you that it's a game changer, because I have found, since I've had my oldest dog, I've found a lot more antlers.
Yeah, probably double.
Double the antlers, I would say. And so that tells me that I was walking by a lot of antlers before, and not even, like I was maybe 50 yards away from it, and I would just walk right by it and never even knew it was there.
Right.
And then someone else would come along and
Yep.
pick it up with a dog, or maybe someone just walked onto it and picked it
Right.
up.
Or lay there and rot.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. When is there much difference between the areas you find them for moose and where you were finding them for deer? Do you find a lot of moose stuff in the feed areas?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Definitely. I think a lot of the more of the medium bulls you'll find in those feed areas, like their yards. You know, like the last 3 years though, it's been tough because we haven't had the snow.
Oh, yeah.
So those moose haven't ran to those yards. So they've been kind of scattered about everywhere, just feeding wherever they, like summering areas. They're kind of in those areas just feeding now, because they don't have to run to that yard to go feed.
Right.
So they're kind of strewed all over the place now, the antlers are. So you're putting on a lot more miles to find the antlers.
Right. Also, too, probably this is where the dogs really come into it. On years where the snow isn't there and the horns are scattered, the dogs help like crazy.
Oh, pick them right up.
You cover a really thick area probably better too.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Like, it's really cool to watch the dogs work. Like that to me is rewarding, because I took the time with these dogs, and this is what I wanted. I wanted a shed dog. So when I got my oldest, I trained him to be a shed dog, and then me and my girlfriend talked, and I said, well, she wanted to get another dog, and I was like, well, I'm going to train her to be a shed dog. So she's like, okay. So I trained her to be a shed dog, and now I got two, and it's like, so one's a lot to take care of out in the woods to keep your eyes on, and two is a lot more.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I mean, I still find some antlers on my own, but very rarely anymore, because these dogs are just
Sweeping everything.
They're sweeping everything, and I'm just like, it's hard for me to find my own antler.
Oh, I bet.
But then again, at the same token,
You're feeling good about
I'm feeling
that.
good about it, because I train these dogs to do this, and
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
like, this is why I have you guys, you know.
Yeah.
And they love it just as much as I love it, you know.
Yeah. I got to say, we found more of our sheds in bedding areas than we ever have at food sources.
Yeah, we don't get a lot of the food sources. Of course, Maine has a little bit different of escape than like Vermont and New Hampshire do. In the areas that we are, is super cut, super thrash. So there's feed everywhere. So it's probably a little bit more about what you were saying, where they're going to be spread out. And the tops where it's nice and green and it's old growth, we'll find a lot more up there, because in the early part and a little bit after the rut, they're hanging out, and some of those bigger bulls seem to drop a little bit sooner.
Yeah.
Some of the real old bulls seem to drop. So you'll find ones that have like really, really fat bases, but you don't get a lot of there's not a lot of inches to the shed, but you can tell it's an older bull. We'll find a lot of those up top.
We found a lot in cuts and stuff where
on the
they
edge
were
of
feeding.
it, on the tops and
right?
stuff.
Or wherever there was a little bit of a bedroom in the middle of a cut. Like if there's a cut with a bunch of spruces and stuff, like an island in the middle of the cut of spruces, and a place for them where it was high and dry to lay down, all the sheds were in those spots. So I'm sure that they will shed a horn more often wherever they spend the most time.
For
Right?
sure.
Yeah. So like if they're in a spot where they lay down, they feed in this cut, but then there's this one little spot where they just like a roof over their head and they just pull in there and lay down. And I always seem to find the sheds at the lay down spots near a food source, or like a backyard kind of lay down spot, higher and away from things a little bit.
Do you think
because
elevation?
like bulls have places where they hang out, and cows have places where they hang out, and they ain't always the same, right? They're not always the same.
I agree with that. Like I find a lot of my more mature, bigger bull antlers and spots that a lot of times you wouldn't normally go.
Yep.
And a lot of those antlers I'm finding are in benches, like on a shelf.
Secluded.
And they're away from everything else,
Yes.
everybody else and everything else.
Yes.
And a lot of shelves and benches, saddles. If you find saddles that have the food source there, but
Right.
it's got to be kind of hidden and away from other people, but they always need somewhere to go. So big bulls like escape routes.
Yes.
And I also find a lot of those spots, like the bull, they like those more mature cuts, like those 6 foot, 5 to 7 foot tall cuts, the like the whippy cuts, like the hardwoody cuts with a little bit of fur here and there.
Yep.
But they like that better because they can stand there and not be seen, and the only thing showing is their head or in their rack, maybe.
Yep.
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 And if they need to go, they can go, and they're gone.
Yep.
I mean, within a step or two, they're just disappeared. And
Right.
for a big bull to do that, that's why he's there, because
Right.
he knows he's got that cover. And
That and any travel corridors between them, like 2 or 3 benches and the runways between.
Yeah.
And especially if a runway was bony, where it was up and down a little bit. We had a whole bunch of them, especially that were like several benches on a mountain, just boom, 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 all staggered from each other. And then a couple, 3 big either skid trails, or like where a buncher drove through, or the moose had a trail there. And wherever it was kind of rough, I always looked on those pretty good, because if the bull was ready to shed and he ran from one down onto the other, he'd go down through those trees and shaking, and boom, and they'd fall off. And sometimes they were in those runways, those little skid trails connecting those benches and oddballs lay down spots.
exactly, there's a lot of spots that, like, I'll find an antler in one bedroom, I call them. There's bedrooms. Like, so like I said, they haven't really been to these bedrooms the last few years. I mean, they've been there, but they don't hang there.
You don't have to.
They don't have to, because
Right.
there's just the snow's not there. They don't have to go to their yard. But if you go to one bedroom and you find an antler, like maybe half a mile away, there might be another bedroom. So I'll follow those, go bedroom to bedroom. Like if I find one antler here in this bedroom, then I know there's another bedroom not far away, I'll go to that other bedroom
Right.
on that trail.
Yeah, and look.
And look. And then if I get to that other bedroom, sometimes I find the match,
Right,
half a mile away, or
Yep.
even a mile away. I've found them before, the match to another antler,
Yep. Yeah, sure.
But it's just when everything works out, when the snow's deep and they have to go to those bedrooms, that's where they are.
Right.
There's no, we've been saying this. There hasn't been the snow.
Right.
So they're scattered right now.
The other thing that can make them go to those bedrooms or the more secluded spots on a steady basis if they get disturbed a lot, right? If there's snowmobilers, if there's people shed hunting, people deer hunting, you know, if they're in that time of year when their horns are falling off, like late season muzzleloader kind of stuff, if they get disturbed much, they have to go back to them places just to get away from people. And a lot of times high. And we found a boatload at like 2,500 feet and higher.
Yeah, really
like,
high.
you know, in any place where the hill was kind of soft, big, soft, easy with good sized wood in it. Right? You
Yeah,
know,
more mature stuff.
Yeah, a little bit more bigger trees. You know, the size of the trees always seem to matter much, and the dryness of the ground. If it's super wet, they won't lay down there, but they'll feed there.
Exactly.
Right? So there's a ton of sign. You see tracks, you see manure, and there's feeding, you know, browsing everywhere, and you say, man, this is a good spot. And I get into that spot, and it's all wet and sloppy, and it wants to come halfway up my boots.
Get
I'm
out of
like,
there.
yeah, that's no good, but let's find the highest, nicest, driest ground next to that. Right? So all you got to do is move uphill 200 yards into the bigger wood, a little drier with a little bit of a roof, and wham, and there's a horn, right? That has always been our deal. And most of ours, we've been finding where they bed.
Yeah,
You know, it's a lay down spot somewhere secluded or something to do with a cut somewhere where there's food.
Or like he was saying, it's the transition points between. I found a lot, like on moose trails, between, like you said, their bedding area and their feeding area. Like I'll find on those strips.
Yeah.
I found a lot through there. When you have your dogs out, do you use like GPS collars to help kind of keep track of them? Or
No.
are they really good about staying close to you?
I got them so they stay fairly close to me, within 50 yards. I don't like them going any further than that. And if they start doing it, I'm like, hey, what are you doing?
Right.
And sometimes they don't respond because they might be on something. And if they don't, like, I go.
Yeah, get
Like,
right over there.
I get right over there, and I'm like, what do you? And I
Something's
start
got their attention.
Yeah, and so I start saying, so what do you got? Like, is there a bone over there? And
Right.
and if they don't respond to me and they're headed,
Yeah.
there's something there.
Right. And if there isn't, they should respond to you and come back your way. Keep track of them in moose woods.
Yeah.
Right. You don't
Oh,
need
yeah.
a moose killing them.
No,
Right.
Well,
Right.
it's funny because one year I was when I first had Hutch. It was his first year out in the woods with me, and we'd shed hunted all spring, and it was getting towards later end of the spring, and we were walking along through this spot. We hadn't checked this one little strip that I wanted to check, and we're walking up through there, and Hutch was out in front of me running around, and all of a sudden something caught his wind, and he turned on a dime and headed to the right, and I'm like, what is he doing? And I walk over there, and here he is. Walked up, there was a moose laying there in its bed. It was a bull, and he'd already started growing back his antlers a little bit.
No kidding.
And the moose was laying in his bed, laying there, sleeping with his eyes closed, his ears pinned right back.
Yeah.
Hutch walked right over to that moose, and he was like inches from his nose, sniffing him. And I'm like, hey. I started hollering at him, like, get over here. Come on.
right.
Like, get over here. You need to get over here now.
Yeah.
And he's looking at me like, well, there's a moose right here. And I'm like, no, get over here. So he finally, he like turned and he came back over to me. And I was like in a panic a little bit because that moose, he'd get up and start thrashing.
Yo, yeah.
Oh, you stomp your dog.
Stomp my dog. And
Yeah.
Right.
so he came over to me and I grabbed a hold of him and the moose snapped out of it.
Yeah.
And like came to and was like, wait, what's going on here? Like,
Yeah.
and he opened up his eyes, his ears pinned up, and he was like, wait. And he looked over at us and his eyes got huge and he got up out of his bed and he ran. And I was like,
Wow.
oh my God.
Nice. Yeah, lucky.
So,
Yeah, and you want to watch for that all the time. The other thing I worry about with a dog in the woods is porcupines, right? You know, if there's one on the ground someplace and the dog can't help it, there's something about porcupines. They at least want to sniff it.
Yep.
You know, and porcupines don't run too fast, so they get right up to them and they go boonk, and they stick their nose on them. And next thing you know, you
Or
got
they turn around
eight
and
quills in their nose, and
Yeah.
it's like, oh man, or
Porcupine turn around and slap them with their tail.
right, just give them a little boonk, and then
luckily, I haven't ran into that problem yet.
Yeah.
That's good.
So,
Or
My-
skunks too.
My first golden retriever, I taught her to do it, and same thing. She run right up to that porcupine, and she just went easy with her nose and just kind of sniffed it, and it just went like this, and she got like 8 of them in her nose.
Yeah.
And she came kai-eyeing back to me, and I tunk, I pulled them out. Oh, she didn't like that, but I got them out of there, and I always worry about that a little bit when they're in the woods. That and rolling in manure.
Yeah.
Your dog can't help it. They want to roll and stuff. How do your dogs react to like the moose and deer and everything else?
So I think
I hate that.
the moose, they don't really roll in it. They go over and sniff it. Like
Yeah.
if it's fresh, they'll want to pick it up and
Yeah.
chomp one down maybe, but
Yeah.
I'll holler at them and they know, but they like the deer turds better than anything. I think.
Yeah. It's like, man, it's nasty.
So I'm always on my toes. Like when I'm seeing them do something like that, like I get over there right off. I tell them, hey, new.
Another good reason to keep your dog close to you.
Yeah.
Right.
And keep them within. I wanted them to work around me.
Yeah.
I always like, don't wander off too far.
So
Stay around.
it's definitely been tough for me with this second dog. This is last spring was my first spring with the second dog, and then I did a little bit this early on this year. And
Recalling a dog is easy when it's one versus two, probably.
Yeah,
when
for
you
sure.
got two and you want to bring them back.
because sometimes they get on, they work off from each other.
Right.
One's like, hey, wait, let's go over here, and the other one's like, okay, let's go over here, and I'm hollering at him saying no, and the other one's still egging the other one on. So so sometimes you got to really put your foot down and be like, get over.
You almost want to work on recalling them more than on training them.
Yeah.
Right. Because you want your dog always to come to you.
And like what you were
Always.
saying, if they come into a situation where like, hey, there's a moose right here, Dad, and you're like, you can get over here so you don't get stopped.
Yeah.
You know, that's where they're recalling them back for their safety and for yours too, I would imagine.
Oh yeah.
Is there a time of year when you don't want to go?
Not really. I mean, you can find an antler any time of the year.
Right. That's the other good thing about a dog.
Yeah.
Because like they could find them in the ferns where you would never see the thing. The dog can go in this brush pile right here.
Yeah, like
and find it.
It's pretty funny. Like when I got my first dog, like I said, he's 3 now. So like now when I go with him, I can like instantly when he's on an antler, like I can just tell by his body language now. Like it's like it totally changes his demeanor. Like just totally changes. And I'll say, "What do you got? Are you on a bone?" And he won't look at me. You got something? What do you got? You got one? And he just doesn't even look at me. He's just getting the wind to get the direction. And once he has it, like sometimes I have to run after him.
Beelines.
Yeah, like he just beeline. So I'm like running after him through the woods. And the second year I had him, I actually started putting orange on him because he's dark brown.
Right. He's that chocolate color. He
Yeah,
blends
he's chocolate
in.
and he blends in, so I couldn't see him 20, 30 yards away sometimes. So I had to put the orange on him.
Yep.
So now when he gets on that scent and he's headed, like I at least have something to see.
Through a lot farther. You
Yeah.
can see way farther.
Way further.
And like you were saying, when he's in some thick brush, you can see that orange through the brush. You might not see him, but you'll see that flick of color.
Right. And you know it's him. It's not some critter or something.
Yeah, and,
Right.
and a lot of the times it's funny is he'll be on something like that, and I'll get over there, and I'm still like 40 yards away, and he's standing there like looking at me with his tail going, and and he's like, right here, Dad, you know, and I'm looking over at him, and I don't even, I'm like, you got one? And he's just looking at me, wagging his tail, and I'll get over there, and there's an antler there. It's like, this is awesome.
Yeah.
You know,
Do they find like a lot of moose skulls and vertebrae and stuff like that?
They find bones. I did train them with bones, like antlers is what I mainly did.
Right.
But I did throw in some like moose bones here and there
Skulls
too.
or something,
just to kind of, because you might find a deadhead, you know, like,
Right.
and you want them to go to that too, you know.
Right.
And naturally a dog's going to want to anyway.
Yeah,
You know,
Smells
anything
nice-
dead,
nice and gross.
Yeah, something nasty, they go right to it. So
Yeah, sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I found quite a few bulls with antlers.
Yeah, we found a bunch of
A
them.
moose had died before they shed their antlers, and found a bull skull with the antlers still hooked to it. I found a few of them.
Yeah.
But like in the state of Maine, you have to be a resident in order to keep those. Like you can go up and grab a shed. If you find a shed out in the woods that's not hooked to a skull, you can just take it home. But if you find a skull with antlers on it, you have to let the area's warden know.
You get a permit for it.
Yeah, and then
tag.
he gives you a tag for it once he investigates it to make sure there wasn't like foul play. Someone didn't shoot it and leave it, or shoot a lot of times in Maine. Like, of course, moose are herd animals, so they hang out together. So if you shoot one, then shoot another one, you have an accidental shooting, and then you have 2 dead moose and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But
So I've actually found over the years, I found 4 deadhead moose bulls and 2 of them were smaller, and one's a 165-inch bull that I found dead, and it had been laying there for probably I'd say at least a year.
Wow.
You know, so it was a little faded up. A porcupine found it and chewed here and there a little bit on it. And then 2 years later, I actually found like a 135-inch bull too.
Wow.
That a bear had found one side of the paddle and chewed it pretty good. But, and that was in Vermont. So, I mean.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's the biggest shed you ever found?
My biggest shed was actually last year, and it was a 73-inch antler.
Wow. Yeah, that's a big
Holy
one.
crap!
Yeah, that's a big one. Yeah, you take 270-inch on each side, plus like 50
gotta
or
be
60
heavy.
inches across, right? That's going to score pretty good.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
it's
Yeah,
close
yeah.
to 200 inches.
Yeah,
I found both sides actually. So one side 73, the other side's just shy of 70.
Ain't that something?
So-
That is nuts.
Yep.
So then you add the 50-inch or 55 inches in between there, and
Yeah, it's turned into quite a sport. I mean, people love it.
people are like, so when I started doing it at 17,
Mm-hmm.
I'd walk into these woods and there wasn't a man track, a person track in sight
Yeah.
anywhere.
Yeah.
Now you go into the woods and there is people
Everywhere
looking for him. You
Yeah.
know, it definitely has came into its own.
Yeah, yeah. People
I'm sure
love it.
that's too with more people doing it. That's where the dogs probably came in a lot because, like you were saying, like you might not be able to see it, but the dog can smell it.
Yeah.
And they can smell it. Like, of course, we were talking about this before we started, but like moose antlers have their own particular odor, especially when you find them out in the woods before they can dry out. And I'm sure with the dog, they can smell that way better than we can. Having dogs has been a big game changer with the amount of exposure to sport.
It definitely has. And like, so I didn't have a dog when I first started looking for sheds until, like I said, 3 years ago. And I started looking for moose sheds in 2009. So,
Yep.
so it'd been a few years. And other people that I knew had dogs have
yeah.
had them, and they're finding antlers. And I'm just like, oh man. And I go into spots and there's man tracks and dog tracks. And
Yep. And you know.
And
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
like, but they don't find them all. So
Right,
don't
right.
let
It's hard.
So
Right.
don't let that discourage you if you're out there looking and you see man tracks or you see man tracks with dogs, because I've been in those spots and seen where a dog never even picked up on the scent. The wind might have been wrong when they walked by there,
Oh, yeah.
and there's an antler laying 40 yards from their track, and
Yeah.
it had been laying there before they'd walked through, like when they walked through there.
Yeah, I don't know how many I stepped on. I didn't even see them. I stepped on them, and the guy behind me says, Dad, you stepped on a horn. And the thing pops up when I step on it, and he's like, he's walking behind me.
You
and
stepped
he's like,
over a bunch too.
Yeah, stepped right completely over
You did
it,
that
right?
3 times. I think 3 times this last season.
In-
We were hunting together.
Yeah, I did it a while back, like maybe 10 years ago, and that was a really huge one.
That was a big one.
It's like, what
I
the
usually
hell?
find one that you stepped over on at least once a year.
I hate it when he's behind me because I'm like, did you find a horn? Right. Every time he veers, even 3 feet from me when he's walking behind me, I'm like, I want to push him out of the way and go get it.
Isn't he supposed to be deer hunting?
I am. I developed a system. So what I do, I don't focus on, of course, when I'm looking for sheds. I'm not typically on a track. Like if I'm on a deer track, I'm focused on the deer, and I'm not looking for sheds. Occasionally, I'm like the deer have stepped right by one, and I see it there, so I'll mark it in my GPS, and then if I don't end up getting the deer, I'll go back and get it later. But what I do, especially when we have bare ground, like early season, and I'm just kind of still hunting, I'll walk for a bit, and then I'll just stop and look for game, look for deer first, look for moose, and then while I'm still standing there, then I'll look for sheds, and then I'll go some more, and then especially when it's hot out, nothing's moving, everything's on its feet, everything's laying down, and I'm like, well, I'm out here, I might as well look for some sheds. And the only time I found deer sheds were in Ontario when we went to Canada, but Taylor's found a couple antlers, whitetail.
Yep.
Yeah, I found 2. I found one that was pretty much just chewed to nothing. It wasn't worth nothing. And then Dad shot last day in New Hampshire. I want to say how many years ago was
That was quite a while.
Rockpile Buck was a million years ago, but we were way back, and Ryan and I were just cross country as soon as he came on the radio and said he shot it, and it was kind of bare groundish, just hunting in the leaves, so we didn't have nothing to work anyway, so we were kind of hammering to meet up with him, and I found I think it was a 4-point.
Yep.
A nice 4-point half, nice white, beautiful,
Good shape too.
nice one. Yeah.
And I think I had found I had
stoked.
found a moose shed prior to you finding that one.
Yeah, we were on it that day. That was New Hampshire. That was mid-New Hampshire. And not a lot of experience hunting, not in the last little bit.
Well,
but
we've been bare ground hunting together, right?
Forever.
2 of us, and one guy's camera, the other guy's doing his thing.
Yeah.
And him as my cameraman.
Yeah, the
and
cameraman
he's supposed to
finds
be
them all the
behind
time.
me, and I'm looking for deer, and then all of a sudden he just takes a sudden right or left. I just want to turn around and charge him because he's probably got a horn laying there. And he's like, Dad, you stepped over one.
Yeah.
Right?
I usually find between probably
Yeah.
my average number is like 6.
Yeah, you're
A
half
deer-
you're half dozen.
half
or
dozen
so.
a deer season.
And they're good
usually.
ones. Most of the time they're good ones.
They usually, I haven't found too many that were smoking fresh. I found a couple that still had blood on the pedestal, and they were sticking up in the snow.
You
and
and
fell
I.
off the moose and plunk.
Oh, yeah.
And the pedestal was sticking straight up out of the snow and still blood on the thing.
Well, the one time
That's
you
late-
and I,
late
you,
season,
you
though.
pulled
Yeah.
a Vermont tag way back in the day. And Ryan and I were hunting up there, and we found a match set that day, too. The two, like, crab claw, spiny, just weird
I
bull.
found half, and you found the other
Yeah.
half. Like,
Yeah, not
it was,
far.
It was like 50 yards away.
Yeah, it was cool.
He had gone through some thicker stuff, and like he was brushing his antlers on the trees, and it fell off. And
Yeah,
then
it was cool.
Then dropped it a little farther down the road.
I think I sold them.
You might have sold them.
No, Ryan's is still over there. He sold my half.
Oh, I sold
he
his
sold
half.
of a match set.
Yeah. Oh,
I was
that's
like,
nice.
gee, yeah, that's cool.
I have no idea how many we've found.
A lot.
I've never counted the pile, but it's half truckload.
We have
How many do you think you found? Andrew?
we had a chandelier made up of them too for a while.
Oh yeah. How many do you think you found?
I really don't. I couldn't put a number on it. I haven't kept track.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. I just find them, and all the nice brown ones I keep. Like
Right.
I don't sell them like a lot of these guys make it a job, and it becomes not fun then.
Yeah, as soon as you put a dollar figure on it, it can take the love out of it.
Yeah.
They've established record books for that now, and of course a lot of the states have record books for sheds, and it's kind of turned into a big deal. It gives it an extra incentive to go out and find something, and go to it, and you've gotten a bunch of state record kind of stuff too, right? I mean, you've got some huge stuff.
they're not state. It's not a state record, but they're in the record books.
Right.
I've got. You guys actually.
They meet the minimums.
Yeah, you guys made me look this up last night. So I went home and I didn't. You guys are like, you should look it up and see how many you have, and I was like, oh, okay. So I went home and I was kind of surprised on the number. Like I didn't realize how many I've actually found that made record book. So
I figured it was quite a few.
It's quite a few.
How many is that?
It's 45 shed antlers that have made the record book: Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont.
Wow, that's awesome.
What's
That is impressive.
So is there a difference in the minimum between Maine, Vermont, and New Hampshire? Do they all have different minimums for how many inches a rack has to be?
So
or?
Maine is 60 inches, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, yeah.
A minimum
Which
of
is a
60,
big horn.
Which is a big antler. And in the last 5 years,
Right.
they Vermont and New Hampshire actually dropped their minimum down from 60 to 55 because of the moose population. It's just not withholding what it used to withhold,
Right,
And,
right. And the horns even have kind of shrunk with the moose struggling, right?
Yeah, so it's pretty hard to find a 60-inch antler now. But now that I've looked at my sheds and know what I have,
Right.
I have quite a few 55 plus antlers, 55 to 60
that would now qualify.
that
if
now
you-
have qualified, and that's like I said, the number I have is 45 trophy sheds.
That's incredible.
That is impressive.
So in my average at 55 inches, out of those 45 is 61-inch average.
Wow.
For the size wise.
So that means a whole bunch in the 70s. Right. You got to have a lot of high ones too.
A lot of high ones and some low ones.
Right, to make up for the low
To make
ones.
up for the low ones.
Oh yeah, because that's incredible.
And then if it was the old school, like I said, the last 4 years they just dropped the minimum down, and so if we were doing old style with 60-inch antler, my average would be that would be 24 antlers at 67-inch average.
Wow, that's a big
that's
antler.
A lot.
So
70 is huge.
Yeah.
Anything in the 70 ballpark is huge. That's
You said your record's 73. you
But
said?
my record's 73 is my
That's a
biggest.
giant.
Well, see, the other thing that matters too is how you score, right? Because you're getting a circumference measure at the base. You're getting a length of the whole horn to the highest part of the palm, right? For the length of it. You're getting the width of the palm, half the thickness included, like on the backside, right?
Yeah.
And then you get an inch for every point
That's
as
legal.
well. Yeah. So you're adding all those inches up. And of course, it doesn't take a great lot here or here to really, or even a number of points to change how the antlers scored.
Or how it grew, or especially
those things matter.
It matters a lot. Like points are like key really to an antler score.
Mm-hmm. You got to have a lot of points.
I mean, and I really don't care about score too much. I mean,
Right.
I mean, if I happen to find a record book antler, I mean, I'll measure it and say if it's close, if it makes it, it's a bonus, you know?
Right.
And that's kind of where I'm at with that. But it definitely, points are key to score because for every legal point you have, it's an inch towards your score.
Oh, yeah.
So if you have an antler that has, 15 points, that's 15 inches towards your score.
That's a lot.
I mean, it's a lot when in the roundabout.
Yeah,
way
when
of
you're
it.
only talking 60 or 70 inches, 15 is a huge amount.
It's a huge amount.
That's a big
Yeah.
percentage of that.
Yeah.
It's a huge amount.
Yeah.
And on an eye guard that sticks way out far is
Yeah.
always key too. If you can, I mean, and that's far and few between.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right. My record's a cheater. It sticks out there a mile.
Yours is
It's
a
this-
big eye guard with a fork
Yeah,
on
it's
it.
this fork with a brow palm that sticks out. It's not a palm. It's
and
like
that's a
as
self,
big as my wrist.
Isn't
right?
that a self-standard?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It stands up all by
Yeah.
itself. Yeah. It's just got this huge brow, points that stick out there.
Do you
that,
know
of
what
course,
your
add to
record
the
is,
score.
Dad? Not to, you know what I mean? Do you
I
have
have
like,
70 something.
Yeah,
that
somewhere
that
there
one
too.
there is 70 or 71, 72, something like that.
Nice.
I don't
That's
know.
pretty
It's
good.
Right in the
Yeah,
70
that's a good.
ballpark.
Anything 60 inches and nowadays is a huge antler.
Yeah.
What do you think your heaviest antler was? The heaviest one?
I'd say
Right.
it's probably like I don't weigh 'em.
Of course, right. Most people don't, and of course, they usually get sold by the pound.
Yeah, so a lot of
Like if
people
you sell
have
them.
asked me over the years, well, what did that weigh? And I'm like,
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you. I don't weigh them because I don't sell them, so I don't. It's not really.
Yeah, that big monster. That day I called you. I got into this.
You got into a
We called it the antler dump.
You
This
got
was
into a
this
big.
spot.
It was a moose yard.
Yeah, it's a bull yard.
It was
like
a big
kinda-
bull yard where they would their
that
wintering
corner.
area, and of course at the time we were getting some serious snow, so it was forcing them up there. And I dropped you off, and we didn't have snow yet.
Yeah.
And I dropped Dad off, and then he went up on the hill, and I went across the valley and up on the other side. And he comes over the radio and says, "Hey, I'm gonna need your help." I'm like, "I didn't hear a gunshot." I'm like, "You didn't shoot nothing, did you?" He's like, "No, but I found some antlers." I was like, "Okay, how many did you find?" "Oh, I found about 8." It's like, "You found 8?"
Yeah.
And he's like, "Yeah."
in like a 200-yard circle.
And he's
there
like,
was 8 of them.
and Dad's like, "I need."
They were planted right there.
He's
Yeah,
like, I need
were
a
there.
sled. And he's like, "I could use one of these for a sled." And I was like, "Oh, that must be a monster."
I found one. I'm like, man, I could put a deer inside this thing. It's so huge.
It was big.
I got a big one.
That was your big. I think that was
That's
your
my
biggest,
one. My record.
And
yeah.
it took. And speaking of, we had a hell of a time getting him out of the woods. How do you carry all your sheds out of the woods?
Frame pack.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the way to do it.
I wear a frame pack, and like so last spring, I'd say my best day I've had was 12 antlers in a day.
Holy crap!
So it took me 2 trips to get those antlers out.
Yeah, it's a
You know,
lot.
It was a
It's
lot.
So much.
So I took the bigger antlers and I took the 2 bigger antlers and I carried them out in my hands, and then I loaded my frame pack the first trip.
That's
And
gotta
then-
be heavy.
Yeah, and then I went back, later after I walked them out of there and
Yep.
went back and did it again. Grabbed the other 2 big antlers and then loaded the frame pack and humped out of there.
Yep.
And on the way out, the second trip, we took a different way out. And we found 2 more antlers on the way out.
Right.
So, I mean,
Wow.
it was like 14 antlers in that day. But it was on the way back out on the last trip. We went out just a little different way because I hadn't gone out that way or we haven't
Right.
checked it. So I was like, well, let's just go down through here, guys. And we went down through there and there was 2 more antlers. I was like, oh, great.
Here we go. Got 2 more.
Oh, don't
That's
you feel so
awesome.
bad for me? He's like, oh, I got 2 more.
Yeah, I got 2 more. and one was actually a book antler, too. So I was like, oh, this is okay.
Wow.
Keith and Keith loves to go for at least one day in the spring, right? I don't normally look
Yeah,
at the
like a
spring
late,
all
like
that
a late
much.
May trip.
Yeah, he
sometimes.
wants to make at least one
Right when the
trip.
snow's out up in northwestern Maine where we hunt.
Yeah,
When the
you know,
snow's
when
gone.
the snow's gone and we can get a truck in there, let's just go up. So, and we don't care if somebody's already picked it or whatever. When we go up in there, and I said, I got this one spot, we got to go up and check the antler dump. And he's like, okay. So we get up there and we walk through the whole thing. And he's like, I got one. And I already had 4. And I couldn't lug them anymore. I was killing. My arms felt like they were 9 feet long because I was carrying them things around. And it's right. And I've got 2 together and 2 together on each side. And I'm carrying them. And I look over and there's another fucking giant. And I'm like, just right. So I just throw them all down. Pow, right. And I walk over and pick that one. That's a pretty nice one. Boom. Throw that one in a pile. Right. So I said, well, I'll just take a ratchet strap with me, right? and then I can just hook them together and hold them over my back and carry them out or whatever. Well, that wasn't enough. So I ended up just dragging this pile with a ratchet strap wrapped around them all, right? Because I couldn't carry it. And we were a 1.5 mile walk in there. So it was so much. And it was gravel and whatnot. And I put this piece of junk on the bottom, this old one, right, to hammer it. And I put all the other ones on top. And he's like, man, you ought to try and carry at least, and I said, I'll carry the 2 big ones. But the other 2, it just right? So we get them all done. And I'm like, I don't even want to look anymore. I don't want to see another one because I'll have to carry that one out too. And I don't want to walk another. We walked in 1.5 miles. We did like 1.5 miles of circling and then another 1.5 miles back out. And I don't want to go back another 1.5 miles, grab some more and come back out another 1.5 miles again. I don't want to do that. I don't want to come back.
Yeah,
right?
one trip.
Right?
Yeah.
But we ended up just all we could lug, and we both same thing. And the pack was really the way to go. If you've got any kind of frame where you could tie it to it, and even if you had some extra twine and you just made a stick frame and hooked them all to that, and then was able to put it on you or something, have something so you can carry it.
If you're gonna make a day of it, though, how you do it with a frame pack.
That's a way to go.
Definitely the way to go.
So what I do too, also another little thing I do is I bring a luggage, like a sports bag. You know how a sports bag has a strap that goes with 2 hooks that strap onto a sports bag, that you throw over your shoulder.
Right.
I'll take that with me in my frame pack, plus paracord.
Yep.
Okay. And then a lot of the times what happens is with the dogs is when I have the dogs, I have them all the time now. So this is what I do. But if I find a nice couple antlers, I have to stash the bag with the antlers because the dogs get confused with the scent on my bag sometimes, and they keep coming back to me because they smell that antler on my bag.
Yeah.
So when I get at least 2 antlers on my bag, I'll usually stash my bag. And then what I do is I hike around with the paracord and that strap. And then if I find some more antlers while I'm gone in that spot, I'll just tie the antlers together with the paracord, then take the strap and hook the straps to the paracord, and then I make my sling.
Nice.
To carry them back. To carry them back to the frame pack.
Right.
And then I'll load them on the frame pack, and then we'll go to another spot not far away and be like, okay, let's cover this spot, and I'll drop the frame pack, and then we'll do another loop in there in a spot. And
well, that's what him and I ended up doing. We get in there and we find a boatload on the front side, and I'm like, we got to check the rest of this, right? Because
we got to
like,
come
as soon
back.
as you come on to something that's pretty good, you got to finish circling, right?
Yeah.
So we end up circling the entire mountain, and we made 2 more piles, and then later on ended up driving the Jeep up there, made this huge pile of sheds on top of the Jeep. That was the heyday of moose, though.
Yeah,
that's when moose were tons, right? And it was the Moose Mall, we named it. There was just tracks everywhere, and
it looked like a barnyard.
It was also the cow part of the yard.
Yep. So all the bulls were coming in to hang out with them.
Yeah, but there was stuff in the back, and we had already done all the stuff in the back, and that's where most of the sheds were.
Yeah.
And then we're like, well, let's go down by the food and where the cows are now, because we've already covered that section of mountain and the front side. Let's go down there and check that. So we started circling around that, and like even then, we would go out the chutes from the bedroom area where they would lay down. We'd work all those trails going out into the cuts, like. Also, too, where the main skid trail came from the back of the cut and the skidders came down along the edge of the woods. They use that like crazy. Yeah. So we would start with that and follow each one of them down into. And if there was any greenery standing up in that cut anywhere.
We check that greenery.
Right, even
shade
one big fir tree.
The food.
And there's a bed underneath it. You got to go over and check that fir tree. The other thing is like rubs, right?
Yeah.
Like rubs, any place where the moose have been pounding. And, of course, they come in different ages and sizes and stuff. We found a ton of them there.
So, with rubs, if you find rubs, you're in there fresh and it's on the snow or it's on the ground looking fresh and it looks fresh, it looks green like they just rubbed it and you smell that pitch, then he's right there somewhere.
And he's thinking about it. Even if he ain't got the horn off yet.
He's got an itch, so he's trying to get that horn off. And I found that a lot where I found horns right underneath the rubs before.
I found quite a few under rubs too.
Just laying right there underneath the rub, just laying there because he had dropped one. And I noticed if they drop one, because a lot of the times naturally they'll drop one. without rubbing. But then they have the other one, and then they don't like it up there. It's uneven and it doesn't feel right. And then they start pounding trees. And if you find places where they pounded trees, then start looking.
Yep.
Yeah.
The other thing we found a lot, and of course, people find tons of snowmobile trails, right? Wherever a bunch of greenery comes down off the mountains and converges with the snowmobile trail through the middle of it, and the moose are using the cover and the less snow to move, and if there's feed around, right? And then they get to them snowmobile trails, and of course they feel comfortable in them. And if there's 2-3 bulls, they end up knocking horns. Right?
I found that a lot too, where they've sparred and played, and they've knocked a horn off one of their buddies, and it's laying there in an open spot where they play. You know? And
you start seeing where the moose hoedown took place, and they were all pushing and shoving. And even if there isn't a horn there now,
you could go back in a week, and there might be a horn there, as long as you didn't bump them out of there.
Yeah, or they at least there's 2-3 bulls that are together, and if you didn't disturb them, and they're still got their horns on, that'll be a great place to start. And then look for more of that, like tussling.
So a lot of the times they go back to those spots to do that.
Yeah.
Like I've noticed over the years, like if they play in a spot like that, they play in that spot year after year. They play there.
Yep.
And you'll year after year you'll go there and they're sparring there. They're playing there. There's hair there. There's tracks there. But what you said earlier about being in its heyday back in the day when you found the antler dump.
Yep.
When I started looking for moose, it was at the end of the heyday. So this is where I feel like I've struggled because I've talked to a lot of older guys that shed hunted when it was in its heyday, and those guys were telling me stories that I can't even believe. Like they're driving into these spots to log, and they're pushing moose antlers up off the road, up onto the snowbanks just to get into their spot, and then they'd pick them up if they were good ones, or they'd leave them, or they'd wait till spring and then pick them up.
There was a ton of big ones.
There was a ton of moose, ton of big ones, and everybody sold them. But when I started looking for the moose, it was at the end of the heyday. So from when I started in 2009 looking till now, it's tough.
Yeah,
it's
not
really tough. It's not what it was,
and for sure.
And for me to have that many big antlers, you guys made me open my eyes when I looked. I didn't realize I had that many big antlers, and for me to find that at this time of the moose, it's quite a feat for me.
Mm-hmm. Also, too, it's a longer, harder search. It's also a more scattered search because you might have only 2 or 3, especially if you're looking for a bighorn, only 2 or 3 real good bulls in sometimes 15, 20, 30 square miles, right? There might only be 1 or 2 really good bulls. And it might be a lot of moose in general, and even a lot of little fellas, that are up and coming. But to find a lot of the big ones, and the small ones are hard to find. That's where the dogs probably really come into it. They
really
find the little ones a lot easier. But the big, huge stuff, oh boy, those are tough.
Well, they find those big antlers easier.
Yeah, they smell.
Because they smell, they're bigger, they smell a lot more. I've followed my oldest dog 150 yards to an antler before.
Wow, that's a long ways.
And just running after him, like, you're on one, aren't you? And he don't even look, he's just headed, and I'm headed right behind him, And then I walk up there, and it's like, whoa, there's an antler.
Glowing.
It's like just like a monster. You're like, oh my God, wow. Yeah. Good boy,
Big difference.
Yeah, big difference, and I would have probably never walked over there.
Right.
Like we found a 71-inch antler last year also.
That's huge.
That it was in this little hole, like in this little thick little island of a hole. Mm-hmm. And if you didn't have a dog, you'd have walked right by that thing until a bear found it. Or a coyote, dragged it out of there and started gnawing on it.
And left it in the open
left it in the open somewhere for you to find. But you would have never found that antler if you didn't have a dog.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. What's your favorite time of year to go?
I would say my favorite time of the year spring is great, but when those bugs start coming out, it ain't no fun.
Yeah.
It takes the fun right out of it,
Right.
My favorite time of the year is probably like mid-January.
Mm-hmm.
Like to go look, because if you go too early and are in those spots, you risk pushing them out of there.
Right.
But
before they can drop
But
them.
if you go too late, someone else might have went in there.
Or the snows.
Or the snow has buried them if they've already fallen, if it came hard. I like the snow because of the contrast.
Helps them stand out.
It helped them stand out when I didn't have the dogs. Like, you can see them. It's like, oh, there's a point over there. Like I said earlier in the beginning of this, like there's one out of 70 yards away. Oh, there's one. Woo, there. I mean, they stick out. You know.
In the spring, when it's kind of all brown and it hasn't greened up yet, and the snow is gone, or it's going, right? The snow's starting to go, or it's mostly gone and there's just patchy snow stuffer. Them older ones that are like a year or two old will stand right out. They're gray.
Yeah, they're gray and greenish and white.
They stand right out.
And
you
they
see
stink
them.
too.
Yeah, they're
It's
nasty.
easier for you to see them. So the spring is great for the dogs.
Yeah.
Because of the wet, the stink.
That
'Cause
helps.
When the antlers get wet and they're like, say maybe an antler's buried in snow still, you got a snow patch and there's an antler in there and it's just barely exposed. Well, that if it's wet and it's warming up, that stink.
Yeah.
It makes
They nail it.
Like those dogs are on it. They find it. Yeah, it's a huge difference.
Yeah.
What's the smallest moose antler you found?
It was it fits in the palm of my hand. And it was just like a weird little curled, almost looks like your finger curled moose antler.
No kidding.
Yeah.
That's small. That must have
Yeah.
been hard to find.
I was walking on a trail and I pretty much stepped on it. It was like, oh, there's one. Well, is that an antler? And I picked it up. I'm like, come on, that's a moose antler. It looks like your finger, your pointer finger. If you curled your finger, that's what it looks like.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
cool.
Some little 1.5-year-old bull.
Yeah, just
Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
Once you find a moose shed and you get it back home, what do you do to help? Like, especially when they're like a year or two old, so they're kind of mossy and they have that moldy smell to it. How do you get rid of that smell? And then like when you get them home, how do you take care of them so they'll last?
So if there's an older antler that I find that's in good shape, then I'll take water and I'll clean them up with like a scrub brush or something, just to get the moss or the grime or slime off from them or whatever there is, just to clean them up. And then I let them dry. I put them in a trailer or something, or just let them dry in a garage, or just let them dry indoors. And it's going to take 5-6 months probably for that smell to go.
Yeah.
And
I don't know how many times we came back and I'd throw a pile on the floor here because it was deer season and I didn't want them. So I just threw them in a floor. Come back in the shop the next morning and oh my God, it's
Smells
like
like an
400
old Foot Locker.
Yeah, 400 pairs of boots in here. Yeah, it's nasty.
So I've also noticed on antlers is like if an antler's clean and it doesn't have a puncture hole in it, the antler won't smell as bad.
Right.
Okay, but if that antler they've been sparring and playing and they got a puncture hole in it or something, well, that thing has just been sucking up water the whole year. It's been carrying it, or you find it in the snow, and that antler sucks up that water, and then that makes it really stink even more.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't have puncture holes in it and stuff, like they're not bad.
It'll be better.
It just pretty much smells like their pitch or whatever they were rubbing on. It still has a little stink, but.
Right. Not anywhere near as
Yeah,
nasty.
not like that rotten foot.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Because I don't know how many times.
Rotten foot is a perfect analogy for how some of these antlers could smell.
Oh, yeah. Somebody's old socks.
Perfect analogy. It smells like a rotten foot.
Yeah. Nasty socks. Oh, yeah. We've had a bunch of old stuff there. You pick it up, you look at it, and we'd hang it in the crotch of a tree or something.
It's like 4 years old. Like the palm's all been chewed and it's all smashed and it's just gross. And it's like,
I found one, but
you stick it up, we hang it up in the tree and have it be squirrel bait, and they'll go after that one. They'll leave the good ones alone.
Yeah. So what I've noticed also is, so over the years of me doing this, is the worst critter for an antler, if an animal finds it, the worst critter is a bear.
Yeah.
I would say, because I found antlers where they've chewed the top of that paddle. They found it was brown antler, big antler, and they found it and they just chewed it, and they chewed it all the way down to the base.
Wow.
I mean, but they left the sides, but it
went
was
down
just
the middle.
right
Ate the
down the
palm.
middle and ate the whole palm all the way down to the base.
Yeah,
and it
like
was
gutted it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and they destroyed it. You're like, oh my God, that was a huge antler, but a bear found it.
Well, the material inside's a little softer, and I think it's kind of greasier too.
Yeah.
You take an antler and you saw it open, and there's like this greasy,
Like a honeycomb.
soft, like on the inside,
Yeah.
where and I think that's the part probably absorbs the moisture, and where your smell would come from the fats and stuff, working, inside there. But definitely.
Yeah,
it's
so
just like
you
nothing
can
like
tell
it.
when a bear finds an antler, no doubt. You can, and then so like the second worst for an antler is a porcupine.
Yeah.
I think when a porcupine finds it, they chew and chew and chew, and they'll gnaw that thing and just
grind the points off.
Yeah, they just grind everything right
Yeah.
out. Whatever they can get, whatever they can reach, they get it.
Red squirrels love it.
And then the third is probably a coyote.
Mm-hmm.
So I say it's a bear is the worst, a porcupine, and then a coyote, and then the little squirrels and the mice and stuff like that chew on them too. But the worst is the bear, by far.
You see a lot of chewed ones.
I'm sure they probably eat it a lot for the calcium, and it's probably not as good as bone marrow because, of course, once the velvet is gone, there's no more blood supply into the antler.
Right.
But there's probably a lot of residual calcium and fat and
Good
good
stuff.
minerals for them, which is why the coyotes are chewing on them. It's the same thing with your dog.
Yeah, and you got to remember these bears are coming out of hibernation in the spring, so they're
desperate.
They're desperate, so they're
Right.
they're looking for those antlers, and when they find one, they
Hammer
let
it.
you know.
And there's no food in the woods.
Yeah.
Frosty Forrest Hammond, the biologist for Vermont, the bear guy, he has pictures of black bears right up in the top of yellow birches, and they're eating the buds, just like a partridge, because they have nothing else.
Yeah, what is there to eat?
Yeah, and they're just up there nibbling on those buds on a yellow birch because there isn't anything else. And the bear's up there, boy, 40 feet, right in the top of this tree, bending it over and just eating those. Just amazing.
Yeah, so
There's nothing.
and also when I started doing this in 2009, I've noticed a lot since 2009. There's a lot of dead moose in the woods.
Yeah.
In the spring, and a lot of those year and a half, calves to like year and a half to 2-year-olds are dying.
Yep.
And
the old ones.
And some of the older ones are dying too.
Yeah, you're finding a lot of crash sites. Yeah,
Yeah.
where you nothing but bones, right?
Yeah.
It's going on, boom.
Yeah,
right?
it looks like an airplane hit the ground because it just
scattered.
and of course, like the coyotes and the bears, they pull it apart and they spread the bones around too.
Yeah, moose are struggling. Ain't no question. Between the ticks and the liver flukes and the lungworms and all the stuff they got going on, moose are having a hard
Habitat
time.
too. There's no food for them.
Yeah, a lot of things are happening right now with moose.
Yeah, and I've noticed also. So if people want to get into shed hunting, you need to there's pockets of moose. Mm-hmm. It's not like these moose are living everywhere like they used to.
No.
They're not all over, and that's why you don't see them as much. So there's pockets of them. There's places where they're living and hanging, and then there's places they're just not there.
Yeah.
And I've gone into places where I used to go early on when I first started where they were.
Yep.
And now I go in there.
Nobody.
There's nobody there.
Yep, they're not living there.
They're not there. There's not enough to withstand that spot.
Right.
They're just not.
Yep.
Or the place has gone by. But mainly it's because the moose aren't there.
Right.
Yep.
Yep. We find that a lot where we are, being an industrial forest, right? You have these 7 to 15 or 20-year-old cuts. 20 years ago, they were in that cut and in the bedroom behind it, in the shelves and whatever that were behind it. And of course, they're not there anymore. The food has changed, and now there's a fresh cut somewhere else, right? So they just shift into a, half a mile away in another area, and they're over there now, right? So they move around where we are because of that industrial forest thing. In Vermont here, we don't have anywhere near the cutting, so either there's moose there or there aren't.
Yeah.
Right? Like basically, and even if they were there 20 years ago, doesn't mean they're going to be there, but it doesn't mean they're not there now. You still may have to go look and check, right? You end up doing a lot of looking to just find like the right kind of sign. There's all kinds of moose sign.
Oh, yeah.
But there's the right kind.
Yeah, there's a lot of legwork that goes into it nowadays. A lot. I mean, there's spots that are good, and then there's spots that are excellent, then there's spots that are good. So you always are looking, and then a lot of times I've noticed also is a spot that was good back in 2010 isn't good anymore because it grew up.
Yep.
It got too old and they moved on to something better.
Yep.
And so now you have to go find where they're hanging again. So you're doing a lot of legwork nowadays to find where these moose are living.
And they do a job on the habitat.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they eat everything.
They hammer it.
They eat and eat. Moose is a 4-legged chipper, and they just, from one spot to the next, they just eat all that brush down. And you can see tons of these like bonsai trees everywhere in Maine, right? Where it's a tree that's about 2 inches through. It's got rings for 35 years, some of them.
But it's just
and
4 feet tall, 5 feet tall.
Right, and you can count 8 different new growths coming where they've clipped it, and then all the branches regrew out the side, and they clipped it again, and it grew out the side again and again, and it's like this little food mushroom.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong, there is still a lot of spots that have been good for years because, like you're saying, these moose just keep mowing it and mowing it and mowing it, and they've kept it good.
Yeah, for them.
For them, because they like that spot, and they just mow it and mow it and mow it. So, I mean, there is still spots like that, but you're always looking for, I'm always looking for new spots. Always.
Yep.
Always, always, always.
The other thing too is, like, after a while, when you start finding them and you know the conditions you're looking for, the right amount of shells, the right amount of fur, the right amount of elevation or new cutting or stuff like that, doesn't take long, and you're able to just like look at Onyx, look at like aerial photographs and go right here, right here, right here, right here. And even if it's someplace you've never been before.
I've used satellite imagery a ton and just brought that up and looked and been like, okay, right there looks pretty good. Now, how do I get to that road? Oh, okay.
Yep.
Right over here. Okay. And then it's the second right. Okay. And then I go there, I walk in
Bam.
there, and bang.
Yep.
Antlers.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And like that's how I found my two biggest antlers that I've ever found is I satellite imagery this spot that I found last year. Well, I found it 2 years ago.
Yep.
I deer hunted it. I was looking for a deer hunting spot. Yep. So I satellite imagery it, and I looked, and I'm like, okay, right there looks pretty good. And how do I get there? Okay. And I figured out how to get there. I got there. I drove in there, and I'm driving around going, God, this place looks good. Like, God, there's got to be deer in here. I bet you there's a bunch of moose, and there's a moose standing there, like, oh, well, there's a moose right there. And
they're in the same spots.
Yeah, and I went in there, and it was a muzzleloader season, and I went in there, and I hunted that whole muzzleloader season, and I'm like, and I kept bumping into bulls. And there's another bull, and there's a bull, and it was just bulls. I never saw a cow the whole time. I bet you I saw half a dozen or a dozen, probably a dozen bulls.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, this place is loaded with bulls, and there's moose trails. I mean, pounded. And I'm just like,
Yep.
this place is hot.
Yeah.
And I spent a week, almost 2 weeks in this spot hunting for deer.
Yep.
And I'm like, I need to go back to that spot and check it out,
Right.
come shed season.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that next season, it got done. I went back there early on in the season, shed season, and the first time I walked up in there, I picked up a 73-inch antler.
That's a good start. Holy crap.
So
Thank you.
And that was just like what you're saying. You're looking at a spot, and you're like, okay, right there. And that's what I did. I just looked it up, and I'm like, right there. And that's how I walked. I walked from my truck. I wasn't in the woods that day 20 minutes, and I walked right to that antler.
That's awesome.
something.
I mean,
Yep.
it was like, oh, there's one, bang, 73 inches. Whoa, my biggest antler ever. Look at that. Like, and
Can't wrap your hand around the base.
So then I went back, it's over 8-inch base on that thing.
That's
so,
huge.
yeah.
It's like they're magnets.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I always call my hands are antler magnets.
Yep.
They just come to me.
Yeah.
Well, it's not calibrated because it goes by you and I get it.
Sometimes. Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
A lot of times while we'll be deer hunting, like if I find a shed I like, I'll take some flagging and I'll mark it with my GPS, and I'll put a piece of flagging above it in a spruce tree, and I'll put at the bottom of this little spruce. That way, if I don't get the deer, I go back on a Sunday in Maine,
Pick it up.
and go back and pick it up. Or like I'll film it and take pictures, and we call it the padiddle game. You know, just like when you see headlights, hey, padiddle.
Yeah.
We'll come on the radio and be like, hey, padiddle, I found a shed. And then we keep score. And at the end of the day, we like, I found 6, I found 2, I found a match set, I beat both of you. We got more points. And
Yeah.
it adds, especially when you bare ground.
It's fun.
Yeah, it adds another thing to do in the woods, and it gives you a reason to get out there. And especially when you're not having much luck hunting, and you know,
It's 70 degrees. And
oh yeah, it's hot and miserable out there. It gives
They
you some,
don't run away.
Yeah, the sheds will
they
stay
don't.
there.
Exactly.
You can make all the noise you
That-
want. That
that's-
shed won't run away.
That's
And
what I love about shed hunting.
If
Yeah,
they
you
run
can-
away, they're hooked.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
The one thing I do want to ask, I know this is not in sheds, but you have another record for Vermont, don't you? That's not sheds.
Yeah. State records. Couple, actually.
Because didn't you recently shoot? You got a record bear, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
And it's not just for weight though.
no,
either.
No, it's for the skull also. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
With a muzzleloader.
So you tell us how that went down. We got to hear the story behind that. Your state record bear, man.
That was in September of, what was that? I don't know. You mounted the deer for me, Rodney.
21.
21? Yeah,
Or
20?
20?
20.
20.
It was the third day of the bear season. And I have this spot that I hunt I've deer hunted up in this spot, and I've shot a couple deer up in there over the years, tracking them. I actually shot a nice buck up in there one year, tracking him and shot him in his bed. And my stand he walked right by my stand that day, that buck did. And anyway, I go to that stand, and it's a bear stand. Like, I've sat in this stand for deer, and I've never had a deer come by me. Like,
It's always a bear.
It's
How
always
ironic.
a bear. Like, it's a bear stand. It's not a deer stand, but the day I shot that deer, he walked by that stand.
The one time.
The one time. Like, are you kidding me? And that's like my oldest deer I've ever got. That was an 8.5-year-old buck.
Wow, that's old man.
So he was an old deer. But anyway, the bear, it's a bear stand because every time I sit there, it's a bear. Like, I have never had a coyote, a deer, nothing but a bear. And this spot I have, it's on an oak ridge, and it's a hike to get in there. It takes me like, I don't know, 40 minutes to hike up into this spot, but it's worth it because every time I go to this spot, and it's a random, like, when I go to this spot, it's kind of random. Like, I'm like, today's the day. So like, out of the blue, like, your senses come together sometimes, you know. You guys know what I'm talking about.
The old vibe.
The vibe's
Mojo.
going. You're like,
Yeah.
okay, today's the day. Let's go. So I've walked up in there 4 different years now on that day and shot 4 different bear.
Wow.
Ain't that
Got something going.
Just out of the blue, like the mojo started, you know, like, okay, today's the day. Let's go up in there. Whoop, bang. Shot a bear. I was in the stand an hour. Like, I've shot 4 different bear out of the stand.
Wow.
And that year I shot this bear. I walked up. It was one of those days I got out of work, and I was like, oh, I'm going to walk up in there today and go check it out. Today's the day. So and it's a hike to get in there. Like I said, you got to hike up. It's a half-hour hike to get in there.
Yep.
I got up in there. I got up in the tree stand, and God, it weren't an hour and a half. And I hear something, and I turn and I look, and I see this bear walking across the top of this ridge. Like, it's just like the hill goes up in front of me where I sit. And there's like a shelf right there where I sit. It's like the only crossing on this mountain where I sit this stand up. It's like a natural crossing, and it goes straight up in front of me from there. And I look up on there, and there's a bear walking across the top of it. And I'm like, oh God, that looks like a bear. So I pulled up on my muzzleloader, and this is a muzzleloader that I'm using.
Wow.
And I pull up with my muzzleloader, and I'm like, God, that's a bear. And I'm like, God, that looks like a big bear. And I've had big pictures of big bears up in this spot, and a lot of little guys too. But one year I had a picture of a big bear, and but I've always shot like 130, 140 pound bear out of that spot.
Yeah, which is average for us.
Yeah,
That's an average bear.
Yeah, for Vermont.
Yeah.
And like I said, one other year I had a good bear. That's probably 300 plus pound bear on my camera that I had there that year. And I went in there and I shot that smaller bear. So I was like, well, anyway.
Took care of that.
Yeah. And I'm like, well, what'd I do that for? So anyway. So anyway, I'm in there and I see the bear. And so I pulled up and I'm like looking at the bear and I'm like, God, that's a big bear. I'm like, I mean, it wasn't a question that it was a big bear. Like, I just pulled up and that bear was walking real slow, and he picked his head up and he kind of looked down the hill at me, and I was like, okay, that's him right behind the shoulder, and pow. I didn't even think twice about it. I just pulled up and shot this bear, and all of a sudden I just see him take right off and crashing and thrashing down over this bank, and he went out of sight, and I'm like, I couldn't believe that just happened. Like, I was like,
I just did what I came here for.
I was like, did I just shoot another bear out of this stand today? Like, so all of a sudden, like, it didn't even take, I'd say 2-3 minutes, and that bear just started death moaning, like, rah, you know, doing their death moan, and I'm like, oh, I got him. I got that bear. I'm up in the tree, like reloading my gun. Like, okay. I'm like, I think he's down, and he's death moaning. Then it like went silent, and I'm like,
that's good.
I think he's down.
Yeah.
I think that bear's down. And I'm talking to myself. You know how it goes.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, I was by myself. You know,
We
I didn't
all
have-
do it.
Yeah, I didn't have anybody with me, and I'm like, I think that I got right on my phone. I'm like, hey, Heather. She was up at the property. I'm like, to my girlfriend, I'm like, hey, she's like, did you get one? And I'm like, yep. I was like, you need to go get the jet sled go get the jet sled, go get my old man, and meet me down by my truck. And I'm up on this road. Okay. She's like, okay. So she went and got my old man. I didn't even walk over there. I climbed down out of this tree stand and I walked all the way back down to my truck to meet my father and Heather.
Holy smokes.
So they've met me and I'm like, it's a big bear. Like this thing is a good one. This is my best bear I've ever got, you know? And so we all walked back up into there. And my dad had a bung arm at the time. He had tried to start a chainsaw, put gas in the cylinder and went to pull the thing over. And the gas that he put in there came back and burnt the underneath of his arm.
Ouch.
Yeah. You done that? Yeah. So he had like, I don't know, like 1st degree burns or 2nd degree burns on the underneath of his arm there. And so anyway, so we hiked back up in there. So he couldn't do much he had one arm. He was a one-arm bandit, you know?
Oh, man.
So Heather, she's not really real good in the woods. I mean, but she can get around. And so her and my father helped me drag this bear with the jet sled down off this mountain. And
No kidding.
it was quite a thing. And
Monster.
it was a 290-pound dressed, clean
Holy crap.
bear.
Monster.
Yeah.
Monster.
And so it actually
Double
holds,
the average.
yeah, it like holds the record with a muzzleloader in the state of Vermont
Nice.
for weight. And then
Wow.
I had to wait the 60 days to have the skull measured.
Right.
So I had that measured, and that measures 19 even on
perfect.
the money.
That's
Yeah.
a
Right on.
That's a big one.
So
So the 60 days is the drying period.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
just like an antler too,
Yeah.
like your deer racks. You have to wait your 60 days and.
Right. Yep, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
That's wicked.
thanks.
That's wicked,
Yeah,
dude.
pretty good feat. Like I mean, whatever.
Yeah.
I just love doing it. It's fun. Like I just started hunting bears like 5 years before. So like every year I've been to this spot. Like
Right.
it's
Good
a bear
place to go,
spot.
right? Just
Like
go there and do it.
yeah, I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna walk up in here today and maybe I'll shoot one and then bang, yeah, there's one.
What are the numbers?
Yeah, yeah. I had a full body mount done, and your father actually did
Yeah.
the mount for me.
Yeah.
It's sharp.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I would say that's probably your best chance of shooting a record book animal would be bear in Vermont.
Yeah.
Bears and moose were for a while there. Like you could shoot a record book moose fairly easily in Vermont.
Yeah,
for a long-
back in the heyday.
Yeah, during the heyday, it was good, and we've probably seen the heyday when it comes to moose. I don't think there'll ever be as many as there was then.
Never.
You know, we've kind of learned that, you know, about a 3/4 of a moose to maybe a moose per square mile is about the most you want. And even in the Northeast Kingdom now in E1, E2, those units, they're trying to get it down, you know, get the moose numbers down. You're trying to, what they're trying to do is make the calf production rate maximized. You need as many cows on the land to have as many calves as possible, but not so many that they don't do well and the ticks kill a lot of the calves, right? So you're trying to keep that sweet spot between calf production and calf mortality,
Yeah.
right? Where you're having as many as you can, but not too many that they infect each other with the ticks. You know, it's a host and parasite problem.
Speaking of ticks, when you go out moose shed hunting with your dogs, what do you do to help with keep the ticks off your dogs?
I use what the heck's the name of that? It's
Is it like Frontline, where it's
no,
like
it's not a front line. It's like a treat that I feed them for ticks.
Yep.
Next guard.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Next guard is, and it's like, I think it's the best. Like you give them, it's like a treat, and you just
Yep.
give them that, and it lasts a month. And
And do you use that as well, or treats as well for the dogs when they find them?
I
or-
definitely give them treats every time they find an antler.
Oh, yeah. So that's part of the
So,
incentive program.
Yeah, give
Yeah,
them some
exactly.
motivation. Be
Yeah.
like, oh, if I find this, Dad will give me a cookie.
Yeah, and that's what I did the whole time when I worked with them early on. Was every time they brought back the antler, they get a treat. Every time they find one, they give them a treat. I mean, it's
Right.
that's that
Celebration.
reassurance thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
like, and I praise them up the whole time. You know, like
Yeah, yeah.
when they bring it back, if they find it, it's a praise. It's good job. You know,
They
Like,
would do it without it now, but
they can do it without
but
it now.
it's still
Yeah.
it's still a good idea. Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
keep the treats going like that. They love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, it's not like they're going to gain any weight because they're doing about 1,000 miles in loops and circles.
Yeah,
so they're
like-
burning off those calories anyway.
If I do 10 miles a day and
They've
they're-
done 100.
Yeah, they've done a lot.
I'm
a
sure
lot more than me.
I'm sure they sleep good on the way home in the truck.
Yeah, they don't move.
Yeah, passed right out.
Yeah. Yeah.
What are your plans with, like, how many sheds you got in the house, man? What are you doing with all these things?
I'm just the plan is to keep them like I have been, like all the nice ones, you know. And I keep all the old ones too. I just make a pile or hang them up in a tree, or you know. But is to start making stuff with them.
Yeah.
You know, and I did a chandelier here at Rodney's. He let me use the shop, and
that come out nice.
Yeah, and I also did a table, like a coffee table.
I bet the table was cool.
Yeah, the table came out nice.
What's the going rate like if you want to sell them? I know a ton of people selling them. What's the going rate like for moose horns right now?
It's like $24 a pound. I mean, you know what? There's really no set price, I don't think, on that stuff.
Yeah.
Especially
it's
now.
also probably going to change, you know, as the moose population changes in New England. To find like a shed in Vermont or whatever, your price is probably going to go up, because the only way that you're going to be able to get them is importing them. Really,
hard to come by.
volume. So
Yeah.
you're going to
harder
have
to
a
come
house
by.
full of gold here in a minute. You know?
Yeah. And I'm just kind of sitting on them, and just, you know, if somebody wants something made or somebody wants an antler, then I'll
Give it a whirl.
give it a whirl. Here,
Yeah.
this is the price I want. If you
Right.
say hey, then okay, great.
Do you
If
have
say
do
no,
you have
then-
like a little way that, like, maybe if somebody wanted to have you do something, or if somebody wants to see some of the stuff that you built any place, you put that stuff on like Facebook or something like that?
I put it on Facebook, but I do have a site I'm going to open up here pretty quick.
Okay.
Yeah. And
Yeah, cool.
I haven't got it up and running yet, but it's on its way.
Yeah.
Nice.
And probably when you get that figured out, you'll have that on Facebook.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
So somebody
Okay.
can contact you that way and get a hold of you.
Yeah.
I actually just started blacksmithing, and antlers are a great handle for knife making.
Yep.
So,
yeah, people use deer antlers and
Yeah.
stuff for knives. They've been
I was-
doing that for a long time.
Yeah. So I'm thinking about like some of my less nicer sheds, like I don't mind cutting up, like I'll cut the tines off and use those to make some handles at, you know, not my brand new nice ones, of course, but that would be another really cool thing, I think.
Yeah.
Using them.
A lot of guys are taking them and just chopping them up into dog chews and stuff too, you
Yeah.
know. And
Right.
like I have chopped up some antlers, but the antlers that I've chopped up have been like brown antlers that have been like maybe they had a broken off paddle.
Yeah. Or a bear got it or something.
Or yeah, a bear got it and it was still brown and nice. Then
Chewed.
chewed on, and I'll chop them up if
Yeah.
someone wants some, you know.
Yep.
But
And there's a ton of things decor-wise you can do with antlers. I
Oh,
mean, you
yeah.
can make
Yeah,
shocks.
I think
lamps,
honestly,
chandeliers.
shed hunting is great, you know, and the antlers have a little bit of value now. But I honestly think if you have like a decent little collection of moose antler stuff, you should be sitting on that stuff. Kind of keep them out of the sun, keep them nice, keep them from fading, keep them dry and cold, and then like in a little while, you know, if populations
worth
dip, they're gonna be worth a lot of money.
way more.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's, you know, rather than cutting them up for a dog chew, you know, you can just use like a femur bone or something. If
Yeah.
you
I know,
you're better
just-
off just keep them whole and sit on it, because furniture like that and ornaments and whatever, somebody just wants them, or for like replacement mounts for, you know, all these like upscale restaurants and things. Like you're gonna want to hang on.
Yeah,
to some of
especially
that.
if you got a nice match set. Like you.
Oh
can-
yeah, match
like,
sets. Match sets are worth
a lot
worth
of money.
a ton.
But like you just go to a pet supply shop like PetSmart or something, and like just they'll take like an antler and they'll cut a tine off it, and that one 4 or 5 inch tine as a dog chew is $25.
Yeah, or $30. I seen them. Yeah.
Yeah, or like take the pedestal, you know, and cut the base off it, and that base is $30.
Yeah.
Like especially on the, like you were saying, like the nice brown ones that were already kind of chewed up and they're not, you know, the tines are broke off or whatever, and you can turn those into something, you know, of value for you later. Like you can use that to pay for your gas for your next trip out.
Exactly. You can.
But if you think about what you went through to get them,
Yeah,
spend
like-
a lot of time and effort.
And how much
gas,
time and effort
you
to
name
get
it.
them out,
Oh, yeah.
carrying them out of the woods, and then,
It's a lot of legwork, that's for sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you for having, you know, a little time in your schedule for us, man. It's
Yeah,
been a
this
blast.
is fun.
Yeah, for not bad for your first podcast ever.
Yeah, it's my first time. I'd
Yeah, you
never
did
been
great.
on a podcast.
Yeah.
You're a natural.
Yeah.
You're our first guest too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
first
that's
first
awesome.
one in this series. Anyone who's interested in hitting you up and stuff, they'll reach out to you on Facebook, whatever. Want to check out some of his pictures, that we'll post some stuff too. Show some of those freaking records that you got. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
And once you
Yeah.
get your website up, we can always link that to this podcast too, so they can
Yep.
send people over to
Perfect.
your website
man.
and your social media. So
Thank you guys so much for listening. Appreciate it. Anjo, thanks for coming, man.
Well, thank you guys for inviting me. This
yeah,
is fun.
been a
it's
lot
good
of fun chatting with you.
Yeah, we'll have to do it again.
Yeah.
Take care.
Okay, guys. Till
Thanks.
next
Bye.
time. Happy hunting.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
Later.